The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, releasing David Carter into the glossy marble hallway of Stonebridge Development Group. The company's offices occupied the top 3 floors of the downtown tower, the kind of place where the air smelled faintly of espresso and ambition. David carried only a slim leather folder and his phone. He didn't look like the kind of man people expected to see in this building. No expensive watch, no branded briefcase. Just a simple grey suit, neatly pressed, and a calm confidence that didn't ask for attention. He was early. He liked being early. As he approached the glass doors of the main boardroom, a woman at the reception desk looked up. Melissa, the office manager, had been juggling calls, catering deliveries, and last-minute schedule changes. Her eyes darted over him briefly. Polite, professional, assessing. "Good morning," David said with a warm smile. "I'm here for the project review meeting. 10 o'clock. Melissa glanced at her screen. "Your name, sir?" "David Carter." Her fingers tapped the keyboard. She frowned slightly. I don't see you on the guest list." "I was told my attendance was confirmed," David replied gently. "Maybe I'm listed under the investment group." Melissa checked again, scanning the page. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter, but this meeting is for the Stonebridge Executive Board, and their partners only." "I understand," David said. "I'm one of the partners." Her expression softened briefly, but only with disbelief. "Oh, I see. Still, I can't let anyone in who's not pre-registered. It's a confidential meeting." He nodded, still calm. "Of course. May I speak with Mr. Langston?" She blinked. "Mr. Langston, our CEO?" "Yes," Melissa hesitated. "He's in the meeting right now." "I'm afraid I can't disturb him." David's eyes stayed kind but steady. "I think he'll want to know I'm here." Before she could reply, a young man in a tailored navy suit appeared from the hallway. Ryan Matthews, Stonebridge's operations manager. He carried a tablet and the kind of confidence that came from proximity to power. "Everything all right, Melissa?" he asked. "This gentleman says he's supposed to attend the project review," she said, "but he's not on the list." Ryan gave David a polite smile, the kind used in customer service, not conversation. "Sir, this meeting is for stakeholders only." "I'm aware," David said calmly. Ryan tilted his head slightly. "Then there must be some mistake." "No mistake," David replied. "I'm here to review the status of the Harborview Development Project." Ryan's polite tone hardened. "That meeting is restricted. I can't allow entry without verification." David's posture didn't change. "You're doing your job." "I respect that," Ryan nodded curtly. "Thank you for understanding." David smiled faintly. "I do. But perhaps you should check with Mr. Langston before turning me away." Ryan hesitated for only a moment before shaking his head. "That won't be necessary. If you'll excuse me, I have to return to the boardroom." He turned and disappeared down the hall. Melissa gave David an apologetic smile. "I really am sorry, sir." "It's all right," David said quietly. "You've been very professional." Then he stepped aside, walked to the window and looked out at the skyline, patient, composed, unbothered. Inside the boardroom, the meeting had begun. Charts glowed on a projector screen. Executives discussed budgets and timelines. At the head of the table, James Langston, the CEO, spoke about expansion and investment flow. Ryan slipped back into his seat beside him, whispering something quickly. Langston's brow furrowed. "What did you say?" "There's a man outside who said he's supposed to be here. Name's David Carter. He's not on the list." Langston froze for a split second. What did he look like? About 40, grey suit, calm demeanor. Langston set his pen down slowly. "You turned him away?" "Yes, sir. He wasn't on the invite." Langston's face changed at not anger but realization. "Mr. Carter is the principal investor on the Harborview project." Ryan's face went pale. "Wait, the investor?" Langston nodded sharply. "Not an investor. The investor. The man who owns the controlling shares." The room went silent. Langston stood abruptly, pushing his chair back. "Excuse me." Out in the hall, Melissa looked up as the boardroom doors flew open. "Mr. Carter," Langston said breathlessly, approaching with an outstretched hand. "Please forgive the confusion. I wasn't aware you'd arrived." David turned, smiling with unshaken calm. "No apology needed, James. I'm early." Langston chuckled awkwardly. "Still, you shouldn't have been kept waiting." He glanced toward Ryan, who stood frozen a few steps behind him. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." David looked at Ryan and said kindly, "No misunderstanding. Just a reminder that introductions go both ways." Langston cleared his throat. "Well said. Please come in." As David walked into the boardroom, the atmosphere changed. Quiet respect replacing assumption. He didn't raise his voice or dwell on what had happened. He simply took a seat at the table that was already his. Langston gestured to the presentation. "We were just reviewing the Harborview budget." David smiled faintly. "Then let's see what I'm investing in." Inside the Stonebridge boardroom, the air felt different now. The long glass table gleamed under the recessed lights, and the city skyline stretched beyond the panoramic windows. But it wasn't the view that held everyone's attention. It was David Carter. He didn't sit at the head of the table, though he could have. Instead, he chose a chair midway down the line among the team. It was a small gesture, but it said more than any introduction ever could. He opened his folder quietly as James Langston, the CEO, tried to smooth over the tension. "Everyone, I'd like to properly introduce Mr. David Carter, the principal investor and lead owner of the Harborview project. Without his vision and resources, this entire development wouldn't exist." A low murmur of acknowledgement moved around the room. The people who had barely looked at David in the lobby now nodded with eager smiles. David returned the gesture politely, but there was no gloating in his expression. "Only composure. Please continue," he said. "I'm just here to listen." Ryan Matthews, the operations manager who'd turned him away moments earlier, cleared his throat. "Of course, sir. Let me just pull up the projections." His voice trembled slightly as he tapped the tablet and mirrored the charts to the screen. "As you can see, we've completed Phase 2 ahead of schedule. Our primary focus now is securing the final permits for Harborview East." David watched quietly, eyes steady, posture relaxed. He didn't interrupt, didn't frown. He simply listened, the kind of listening that made people choose their words more carefully. When Ryan finished, David spoke softly. "That's impressive. Who handled the city liaison process?" Ryan straightened. "I did, sir." "Good," David said. "You have a sharp team. I reviewed your quarterly report before flying in. Your coordination with local suppliers cut costs by 15%. Ryan blinked. "You read our report?" "I read everything," David said, smiling slightly. "It's my project." A few people laughed nervously. Ryan managed a nod. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." David's tone softened. "I meant what I said earlier. You're doing your job. But don't let the job make you forget the people doing it with you." Ryan nodded again, quietly humbled. As the meeting went on, the conversation turned toward design changes and financial forecasts. Every now and then, David asked a question. Always gentle, always precise. "What's the purpose of that adjustment? How will this decision affect the community? Does this number reflect efficiency or compromise?" Each time his tone carried curiosity, not criticism. He wasn't testing them. He was teaching them without ever saying he was. By the halfway mark, the whole room had shifted. The stiff corporate energy softened into engagement. People leaned forward instead of hiding behind spreadsheets. Even Langston, normally the dominant voice in any meeting, found himself listening more than speaking. During a brief break, Langston poured David a glass of water. "I hope this morning hasn't left a bad impression," he said quietly. David smiled faintly. "Not at all. Moments like that tell you everything you need to know about a company's culture." Langston hesitated. "You're a fair man. Not everyone would have handled that the way you did." David glanced toward the window. "If I'd reacted with pride, I'd have proven their assumptions right. Sometimes the best way to correct people is to let them hear themselves." Langston studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That's a lesson I wish I'd learned sooner." When the meeting resumed, David asked to see the designs for the Harborview Community Center, the portion of the project meant to serve the public. A junior architect named Sophie nervously presented the plans, stumbling a little as she spoke. "We're proposing a shared workspace and local art exhibit area, but some members of the board think it's too generous a use of space." David leaned forward. "Who thinks that?" A few glances darted around the table. Langston cleared his throat. "Some of our partners felt it might not be the best financial return." David nodded thoughtfully. "Return isn't always about profit. It's about presence." The room quieted. He looked at Sophie. "I like your idea. The community center stays. The point of Harborview is to build something that lasts, not just something that sells. Sophie blinked, relieved. Thank you, sir. David smiled. Don't thank me. Thank yourself for caring about people. By the end of the meeting, the tone had completely transformed. Where there had been tension, there was now respect. Where there had been pride, there was purpose. As everyone packed up their laptops and files, Langston approached David. We'd like to take you to lunch, if you have time. David smiled. Thank you, but I already have a meeting scheduled. With whom? He looked toward the lobby glass, where Melissa, the receptionist, was setting down her headset and organizing her desk. With the only person in this building who treated me kindly before she knew my name, David said. Langston blinked. You're having lunch with the receptionist? Yes, David said simply. She didn't turn me away. She offered me patience. Then he added quietly, and that's the foundation of good business. Langston nodded slowly, humbled. Understood. As David walked toward the elevator, Ryan caught up, his expression sincere. Mr. Carter, I owe you an apology. David turned, smiling. You already gave it, when you started listening. Ryan exhaled, nodding. Thank you, sir, for not making me smaller than my mistake. David placed a hand on his shoulder. That's not leadership. It's grace. Then he stepped into the elevator, doors sliding shut behind him, calm, composed, and leaving behind a room full of people who would never forget what quiet authority looked like. 2 weeks later, the rhythm inside Stonebridge Development Group had shifted. The same marble floor still gleamed, the same glass walls still caught the morning light, but something deeper had changed, a tone, an awareness, a sense of decency that had been missing for a long time. And it had all started with a quiet man named David Carter. He hadn't returned to the office since that boardroom meeting, but his presence lingered. Everyone who'd been there, from the executives to the assistants, talked about him in small, hushed ways, not because he was powerful, but because of how he'd carried that power. He didn't humiliate anyone. He didn't raise his voice. He simply reminded them that respect is a currency too. In her corner office, Melissa, the receptionist who had treated him with calm professionalism that day, sat reading an internal memo. Her name was mentioned in it, twice. Special acknowledgement to Melissa Torres for exemplifying company values in client interactions. She smiled faintly, still not fully believing that a simple moment of courtesy could mean something that big. A knock at her desk pulled her from her thoughts. It was Ryan Matthews, the operations manager. Hey, he said awkwardly. Got a minute? Sure. He leaned on the counter. I just wanted to thank you. For that day, Melissa blinked. Me? For what? He scratched the back of his neck. For not judging him. For treating him like a person. You made me realize how automatic my assumptions were. She smiled gently. We all have habits. The trick is noticing them before they hurt someone. Ryan nodded slowly. You sound like him? She laughed softly. Maybe he rubbed off on us. Across town at a small cafe near the harbor, David sat by the window nursing a cup of coffee. He wasn't there for meetings or press. He never liked fanfare. He preferred to see results quietly, from a distance. His assistant, Elena, joined him with a tablet full of reports. The follow-up audit from Stonebridge came in, she said. Employee satisfaction jumped 20%. Turnover dropped. And the Harborview Project's community program was approved unanimously. David smiled faintly. Good. That means they're learning. Elena scrolled again. There's something else. Mr. Langston wants to name the community center after you. David chuckled. That's unnecessary. I told him you'd say that. He looked out the window where the new Harborview construction site stood across the street. Cranes, scaffolding, sunlight bouncing off steel. I'd rather they name it after something that matters. Like what? Elena asked. He thought for a moment. Respect. Back at the office, Ryan gathered his team in the small conference room. There was no big announcement, just a short, unplanned talk. I want to try something new, he said. Starting this week, every meeting begins with one question. Who are we serving? Not what we're selling, not how much it costs. Who? Because if we forget that, none of this matters. The room stayed quiet for a moment. Then one of the junior analysts said softly, Mr. Carter would like that. Ryan smiled. That's the point. Later that week, David returned to Stonebridge unexpectedly. This time, there were no mix-ups, no hesitation. Everyone greeted him with genuine smiles, Not forced politeness, but familiarity. Melissa handed him a visitor badge, even though she knew he didn't need one. "Company rules," she said teasingly. David laughed. "I respect consistency." When he reached Ryan's office, he found him mid-conversation with two young interns. They stood quickly, startled to see him. David gestured lightly. "Please don't stop on my account." Ryan smiled. "We were just reviewing community design feedback." The younger team had ideas for making the space more inclusive. David nodded approvingly. "Good. The best ideas usually come from the ones still brave." "Enough to ask why." The interns smiled shyly. Then David turned to Ryan. "I wanted to thank you for how things have changed here." Ryan blinked. "Sir, I should be thanking you. You showed me what leadership actually looks like." David's voice softened. "Then prove it." "Keep passing it forward." Ryan nodded. "I will." Before leaving, David visited the Harborview site once more. The sound of machinery filled the air, but the heart of it, the future community center, was already taking shape. He stood for a while, watching workers pour the foundation. There was something poetic about it, how change, like construction, started beneath the surface. Elena joined him again, clipboard in hand. "You know, you could have replaced half of them that day. No one would have questioned it." David smiled faintly. "Maybe, but then they'd have learned nothing. Growth doesn't happen from fear. It happens from grace." She nodded quietly, understanding. He looked at the rising structure and said, "This will stand long after we're gone." That's the point. That evening, as the sun set over the skyline, David received an email from Langston. Subject: a small request. "We're dedicating the Harborview Center next month. Would you join us for the ceremony? The team wants to thank you in person." David smiled at the screen. He typed only one line in reply: "I'll be there. But make sure Melissa and the staff are in the front row." A month later, the sky over the harbor glowed a soft orange as the new Harborview Community Center prepared to open its doors for the first time. The air smelled faintly of salt and new paint. Rows of folding chairs faced a small outdoor stage lined with banners that read, "Built for the people, by the people." City officials, business partners, and families from the neighborhood gathered in clusters, their voices blending into the hum of anticipation. But inside the front row sat the people who had lived the story most deeply: James Langston, Ryan Matthews, Melissa Torres, and the rest of the Stonebridge team. They weren't there as executives today. They were there as students of humility. And at the center of it all was David Carter, standing quietly off to the side of the stage. No entourage, no title card, no announcement. He wore a simple navy suit and that same calm expression that had changed an entire company without ever raising his voice. The ceremony began with short speeches. Local leaders spoke about the jobs the project created, the opportunities it promised. Then Langston took the stage. He adjusted the microphone and looked out over the crowd. "A year ago, this was just an idea," he began. "An empty lot and a blueprint. And somewhere along the way, we were reminded that what we build is never just about steel and glass. It's about people." He turned slightly toward David. "A few months ago, I made a mistake. A man came to one of our meetings, the man who made this project possible, and I didn't recognize him. None of us did." The audience fell silent. Langston continued, his tone steady. "That moment changed more than a meeting. It changed how we see one another. It reminded us that success means nothing if it costs us our humanity." He gestured toward David. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the person who built this project not just with funding, but with integrity, Mr. David Carter." Applause rose from the crowd, not thunderous or theatrical, but sincere. David stepped up to the podium, modest as always, and smiled faintly before speaking. "Thank you," he said. His voice carried easily, calm and clear. "I don't usually make speeches. I like to think buildings speak better than I do." The crowd chuckled softly. He glanced toward the structure behind him, the new community center, sunlight catching its glass entrance. This place was built for more than meetings or numbers. It was built for connection, for the young people who'll study here, for the families who'll gather here, for anyone who's ever been told they don't belong in certain rooms. He paused. I was one of those people once, even here for a moment. Langston lowered his head slightly. David continued gently. But that moment wasn't about embarrassment. It was about awareness. Sometimes life gives us the chance to see ourselves clearly, not to punish us, but to make us better. He looked toward Melissa in the front row. Kindness is a small thing until you need it. Then it becomes everything. Melissa smiled, blinking back tears. David's eyes swept across the audience. If this building stands for anything, let it stand for this. Respect isn't a reward. It's the starting point. Applause filled the harbor, stronger now. Not just for what he said, but for the truth behind it. After the speeches, as guests toured the new center, David stood by the entrance, greeting locals and staff. Children ran through the hallways laughing, their voices echoing between bright new walls. Langston approached, extending his hand. You turned a lesson into a legacy. David smiled. You built it. I just reminded you why it mattered. Ryan joined them, shaking his head with quiet awe. Hard to believe this all started with one misunderstanding. David chuckled. Most lessons do. Then he added softly, the important thing is what comes after. As the sun began to dip, painting gold across the water, Melissa found him standing alone near the harbor railing. You're really leaving without saying goodbye? She asked. He turned with a gentle smile. I prefer quiet exits. They leave room for gratitude. She nodded, smiling back. Thank you for seeing me that day. You didn't have to. David shook his head. You saw me first. That made all the difference. They stood in silence for a moment, the waves lapping gently against the dock. Then he checked his watch. I should go. There's another project waiting. Melissa raised an eyebrow. Another building? He smiled faintly. Another team that's forgotten what respect looks like. She laughed softly. Then they're in good hands. David tipped his head in farewell and walked toward his car, the last light of the evening falling across the newly built Harborview Center. Behind him, the building's glass reflected the sunset, warm, real, human. A quiet monument to grace.